The living room was a battlefield at 3 a.m. The kind where the only sound was the ragged gasp of my own breath and the faint drip of blood hitting the hardwood floor. My name is Emily Harper, 24 years old, and I was sprawled there. My right leg twisted in a way that screamed wrong, pain clawing through me like wildfire. My vision blurred, but I could still make out my mother, Margaret, standing in the doorway of our suburban Ohio home, her silk robe glowing faintly under the dim hallway light. Her arms were crossed, her face a mask of indifference, as if she were watching a stranger's tragedy unfold on TV. "Mom," I croaked, my voice splintering. "Please, stop him." But she didn't move, she just stood there, her slipper tapping softly, like she was waiting for the credits to roll. The air in our Cincinnati home was thick with the kind of silence that chokes you. My stepfather, Richard Coleman, was still raging, his voice a thunderstorm rattling the walls. I couldn't even pinpoint what set him off this time, something about a late bill. Or maybe me, stirring trouble, again. His boot had found my ribs with a sickening crunch, sending me crashing to the floor. That's where I stayed, trembling, my cheek pressed against the cold wood, blood pooling in my mouth. I looked to Margaret, clinging to a fading memory of her brushing my hair as a child, singing soft lullabies about open fields and starlit skies. I thought she'd step in, pull me from the wreckage like she did when I was 6 and a wasp landed on my arm. Her panic so fierce it scared me more than the sting. But tonight, her eyes were empty. Richard stormed past her, wiping sweat from his brow like he'd just finished a chore. And she didn't flinch. Not a word, not a glance. Then she stepped forward, her shadow falling over me like a cold blanket. I thought, for one desperate second, she was going to help. Instead, she leaned down just enough for her whisper to cut through the haze of pain. "You should have signed the papers. Emily, this didn't have to happen." Then she turned and walked away, her slippers whispering against the carpet. I don't remember blacking out. But when I woke, paramedics were kneeling beside me, their voices sharp and urgent. "Stay with us. Emily, can you hear me?" Numbers were called out, pulse, blood pressure, things I couldn't process. Through the chaos, I caught a glimpse of Mr. Larson, our neighbor, standing at the door, his face pale, eyes wide with something like guilt. He didn't speak, just watched as they lifted me onto a stretcher. The hospital lights burned my eyes. Sterile and unforgiving, I drifted in and out, catching fragments of conversations, fractured tibia, 2 cracked ribs, possible concussion. My mother's heels clicked closer, a rhythm I'd know anywhere. Deliberate and unhurried, she sat beside my bed, her perfume sharp and floral, but offered no touch, no comfort. "You've made things hard for everyone again," she said, her voice flat, like she was reading a grocery list. I turned my head away, staring at the blank wall, and something inside me shifted. That night wasn't the start of my story, it was the moment it shattered open, exposing the truth I'd been too afraid to face. My mother had been erasing me long before Richard's boot ever landed. At 24, I'd spent years learning to shrink myself. Margaret had a way of making you feel like you were the problem, like your existence was an inconvenience she was generous enough to tolerate. I grew up in a tidy Cincinnati suburb, where the lawns were manicured and the secrets were buried deep. Our house, a 2-story colonial with white shutters, looked like a postcard, but inside, it was a maze of control. Margaret was the architect. She'd rewritten my story before I even knew how to hold a pen. When I was 17, I needed my birth certificate for a college scholarship application, a full ride to Ohio State. My ticket out, I found it in her desk, tucked in a manila folder like it was just another bill. But when I read it, my stomach dropped. Father, Richard Coleman, my real father, Thomas Reed, died in a car crash when I was 4. His laughter a faint echo in my memory. I confronted her, holding the paper like it was evidence of a crime. "This isn't right," I said. She didn't look up from her coffee. "It's for school records. Emily, don't make a scene." That was her mantra. Don't make a scene. It was the duct tape she slapped over anything too raw, too real. Then there was the scholarship. I'd checked the mailbox every day, waiting for the letter that would change my life. Weeks passed. Nothing came. My guidance counselor, Ms. Carter, frowned when I asked about it. They sent the acceptance weeks ago, she said, pulling up the record. My heart sank. I tore through Margaret's sewing room, her sacred space, off limits to me, and found it hidden under a pile of fabric scraps. Unopened, my name printed neatly on the envelope. Congratulations, Emily Harper. You've been awarded? The deadline had passed. When I confronted her, shaking, she folded laundry without missing a beat. You wouldn't have handled college, she said, her tone casual, like she was discussing the weather. I saved you the disappointment. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. She didn't want me to leave her orbit. Margaret's control went beyond documents. She spread whispers that I was unstable, overly sensitive, a girl who needed protecting from herself. When I was 16, I told a teacher about a bruise Richard left on my arm during an argument in the garage. The next day, Margaret stormed into school, eyes brimming with crocodile tears, insisting I was troubled and trying to sabotage her marriage. The teacher believed her. Everyone did. Her lies were polished, her performance flawless. She'd convinced the world I was the problem. And I'd started to believe it too. Her control extended to my relationships. My best friend, Sarah Mitchell, was my lifeline in middle school. Shared playlists, late-night texts, promises to escape our small town together. But one day, Margaret picked me up early from school and said, "Sarah's not good for you. You don't need her kind." I never saw Sarah again. Not until years later. My birthdays went uncelebrated. My high school graduation ignored. The family photo wall stopped at my kindergarten years. As if I'd ceased to exist after that. Margaret's attention was reserved for her golden child. My half-brother Caleb, 15. Who could do no wrong. Once, I spent hours baking a lopsided birthday cake for myself, proud of the uneven frosting. That night, Margaret repurposed it for Caleb's science fair win. Piping, "Great job, Caleb," in blue gel. I stood by the fridge, invisible, as guests clapped and snapped photos. My own birthday, erased. The final violation came when I found the camera. It was taped under a shelf in my bedroom. A tiny black device with a blinking green light, pointed at my bed. My skin crawled as I ripped it out and drowned it in a glass of water. When I called Margaret, my voice steady despite the rage. She sighed like I was overreacting. "Good daughters don't keep secrets in my house," she said. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. "I'm not your house," I replied. "And I'm not yours." That was the end of pretending. That night on the living room floor, as pain seared through my broken body, I realized silence was no longer an option. I'd spent my life trying to be the good daughter, quiet, grateful, small. But good daughters don't survive in houses built on control. As the paramedics carried me out, I made a promise to myself. I'd never go back to that silence. In the hospital, when the nurse offered to report the abuse, I hesitated. The last time I spoke up, Margaret twisted it against me. But this time, I nodded. "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Do it." Back in my tiny apartment, a one-bedroom rental on the edge of Cincinnati, I started rebuilding. The sunlight streamed through the blinds, catching dust motes in the air like tiny, untouchable snowflakes. My leg was in a cast. My ribs ached with every breath. But I felt something new, clarity. I pulled out a notebook, not a diary, but a record. Page after page, I documented everything. The altered birth certificate, the stolen scholarship letter, the camera, Margaret's cold words. I wrote until my hand cramped. Until the truth was no longer a weight but a weapon. One morning, my phone buzzed. A message from Sarah, my old friend, who'd heard about the hospital. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stared at the screen. My heart caught between hope and caution. "Yes," I typed back. "It's time someone else knows." That was the first step. The second was a folder labeled Evidence, where I organized every piece of my story, screenshots, documents, photos. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting. The story doesn't end here. Emily's journey is one of reclaiming her voice, piecing together a truth her mother tried to bury. From the ashes of that night, she builds a case, Not just against Richard's violence, but against Margaret's calculated erasure. She finds allies in Sarah, a lawyer named David, and even strangers who see through the lies. The courtroom becomes her battleground, where she lays bare the scholarship theft, the fake birth certificate, the surveillance, and the night she begged for help that never came. And when the gavel falls, it's not just a legal victory, it's a declaration: Emily Harper exists. And her story will not be silenced. This is for every daughter told to stay quiet, to be grateful, to shrink. What would you do if the people meant to protect you were the ones breaking you? Share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more stories that unearth the unspoken. The clock on my kitchen wall ticked relentlessly, each second a reminder that time doesn't heal all wounds, it just buries them deeper if you let it. My name is Sophie Bennett, 26. And I was sitting at a wobbly secondhand table in my Cincinnati apartment. A cast on my leg, bruises fading along my ribs, and a notebook open in front of me. The pages weren't filled with dreams or poetry, they were a battlefield. Inked with evidence of a war I'd been fighting my whole life. This wasn't just about surviving. This was about clawing my way back to the truth, piece by jagged piece, and refusing to let my mother, Ellen, rewrite my story any longer. The morning after I left the hospital, the sunlight spilled through my apartment's blinds, catching dust motes in a slow, silent dance. My leg throbbed under the weight of the cast. But the real pain was deeper, an ache that had been growing since I was a child. Fed by years of being erased. I'd always known my mother, Ellen, controlled everything. Our house in suburban Cincinnati. The stories she told the neighbors. The way she smiled when she lied. But it wasn't until that night, when her husband, Michael Turner, left me broken on the living room floor, that I saw the full scope of her betrayal. She didn't just stand by while he hurt me. She'd been dismantling me for years, brick by brick, until I was barely a shadow in my own life. I started with a notebook, not a diary. Diaries are for people who expect to be heard. This was a ledger, a record of every lie, every theft, every erasure. I wrote about the birth certificate I found at 18, when I needed it for a college application. My real father, David Walsh, died in a factory accident when I was 5. His memory reduced to a faint smell of cedar and the echo of his laugh. But the document listed Michael as my father, his name typed neatly where David's should have been. When I asked Ellen, she waved it off, sipping her tea. It's for legal clarity. Sophie, don't overreact. That was her weapon. Don't overreact. It shut down every question, every doubt. Then there was the scholarship. At 18, I'd earned a full ride to the University of Cincinnati. A chance to escape the suffocating walls of our house. I checked the mailbox daily, my heart racing with hope. But the letter never came. My counselor, Ms. Reynolds, looked confused when I asked. It was sent weeks ago, she said. I tore through Ellen's office, a room she kept locked, and found it buried under receipts and old fabric swatches, an unopened envelope with my name. Congratulations, Sophie Bennett, you've been awarded? The deadline had passed. When I confronted her, she didn't flinch. College would have been too much for you, she said, folding a sweater. I was protecting you. Protecting me? No. She was keeping me small, tethered to her control. Ellen's lies went beyond papers. She told teachers, neighbors, even my friends that I was fragile, unstable, a girl who needed to be handled carefully. At 17, when Michael grabbed my wrist too hard during an argument, leaving a bruise, I told a school counselor. The next day, Ellen showed up, eyes wet with practiced tears, claiming I was troubled and seeking attention. They believed her. Everyone always did. She was a master at spinning stories. And I was just the difficult daughter who couldn't be trusted. But the notebook wasn't enough. I needed more than words. I started collecting evidence, screenshots of Ellen's cold texts, the altered birth certificate, photos of the scholarship letter. I found a tiny black camera hidden under my bedroom shelf, its green light blinking like a traitor's heartbeat. When I confronted her, she sighed. Good daughters don't hide things. I didn't scream. I just pulled the camera out and let it sink in a glass of water, vowing never to let her control my space again. Then came the lifeline. My phone buzzed one gray morning. A message from my old friend, Mia Larson, who I hadn't seen since Ellen banned her from my life at 14. Calling her a bad influence. Heard about the hospital. Can we talk? My hands shook as I typed back. Yes. I need to tell someone. Mia became my anchor, listening as I unraveled years of suppressed truth. She connected me with Ms. Callahan, my high school English teacher, who admitted she'd been emailed by Ellen years ago, claiming I was too emotionally volatile for leadership roles. I believed her, Ms. Callahan said, her voice heavy with regret. I should have fought for you. Her words weren't an apology, they were a spark. I added her statement to my dossier, labeled school suppression. The most painful discovery came through Mia. She handed me a battered shoebox, passed on by a friend of my father's. Inside was a cracked flip phone and a printed log of text messages from David Walsh, sent to a number I never knew I had. I'm trying. Sophie, your mom won't let me reach you. Happy 16th. Kiddo, I left something for you at the bank. I love you. Always. Dozens of messages, spanning years, all intercepted by Ellen. She hadn't just erased my father's name, she'd stolen his voice. I sat on my couch, clutching the paper, tears blurring the ink. He hadn't abandoned me, she had. I knew I had to reach my half-brother, Ethan, 16, the golden child Ellen doted on. He wasn't the enemy, but he'd been shaped by her lies, raised to see me as the problem. I mailed him an envelope with 3 things: a copy of my original birth certificate, a photo of an uncashed check from David's will, and a note. Ask her why she hid this from us. I didn't expect an answer. But hours later, my phone lit up. What is this? Why now? Ethan's text read. I replied, because you deserve the truth. And so do I. He went silent, but I'd planted a seed. The Hamilton County Courthouse was a tired brick building, its hallways smelling of pine cleaner and stale coffee. At 26, I walked in with a binder thicker than my arm. Tabs color-coded. Messages. Documents. Medical records. Witnesses. My lawyer, Daniel Hayes, met me outside, his tie slightly crooked but his eyes sharp. Mia parked the car and squeezed my hand. You've got this, she whispered. I wasn't so sure, but I nodded. This wasn't just about justice, it was about reclaiming my name. Inside, Ellen and Michael sat at the defendant's table. She wore a pale lavender dress, as if softness could erase the damage. Michael's jaw was tight, his arms crossed like a shield. Ethan's seat was empty. I took the stand, my voice steady as I laid out the truth. The scholarship letter hidden in Ellen's desk. The birth certificate rewritten to erase my father. The camera in my room. The night Michael's boot broke my bones while Ellen watched. I wasn't just ignored, I said, meeting her eyes across the room. I was deliberately erased. Ellen's lawyer, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, tried to twist my words. Ms. Bennett, would you say you're prone to emotional outbursts? He asked. His smile patronizing. I didn't flinch. I brought evidence, I said, pointing to the binder. If I'm so emotional, why do you need a folder full of proof to argue with me? The room went quiet. Daniel presented the necklace, a silver star charm Ellen claimed she'd given me as a child. Then he showed a letter from my father. I bought this for Sophie. Tell her it's from Dad. Ellen's face flickered, a crack in her perfect mask. The judge's voice was calm but firm. This court finds the claims substantiated. Michael Turner is subject to a 5-year restraining order, effective immediately. Ellen Turner is liable for emotional damages and compensatory restitution. She paused, her eyes scanning the room. The pattern of psychological manipulation, obstruction of opportunity, and coercive control is clear. It was over. I'd won. Outside, Daniel shook my hand. You were unstoppable, he said. Mia hugged me, whispering, you're free. But freedom wasn't a single moment, it was a slow unfolding. A road I was just beginning to walk. 3 months later, I stood in a small meeting room at the Cincinnati Community Center. The air heavy with the scent of lemon disinfectant and burnt coffee. A handmade banner hung on the wall. Its letters uneven but bold. Family isn't always blood. 12 women sat in a semicircle, Their faces a mix of curiosity, pain, and quiet strength. I was 26, still healing, but I wasn't alone anymore. My name is Sophie, I began, my voice steady. I used to think silence was survival. That if I stayed small, things would get better. But silence doesn't heal, it hides. And what hides too long rots. The women shared their stories. A mother who erased her daughter's voice. A family that ignored a breakdown. A woman who divorced her parents to save herself. Their words were raw, jagged, but honest. One girl, maybe 17, lingered by the door, her oversized hoodie swallowing her frame. I recognized that posture. The armor of someone told there too much. You okay? I asked. She whispered. I still live with her. I knew who her was. I unclasped the star necklace. The one from my father. And held it out. Hold onto this until you're ready to let her go. I said. Her eyes glistened. But she took it, her fingers trembling. That night, I sat on my couch. A mug of tea warming my hands. My phone buzzed. A message from Mia. You didn't just save yourself. You're redefining family for all of us. I smiled, typing back. I'm not the last broken girl. Across town, I imagined Ellen in her perfect living room. The one with curated pillows and soft lighting. Maybe she found the postcard I sent, announcing the next workshop. Maybe she scoffed. Or maybe she tucked it into the same drawer where she hid my father's letter. The one she swore never existed. Maybe, just maybe, it haunts her every time she opens it. Not revenge, just consequence. A week later, I returned to the park near my apartment. The same bench by the pond where I'd cried months ago. The geese were louder, the air crisp with early frost. I pulled out my journal. Its pages nearly full with ink and memory. On the last page, I wrote, "You don't need an apology to move forward, just proof you survived." I folded the page into a paper crane, clumsy but deliberate, and let the wind carry it to the water's edge. It spun, caught the light, and landed softly. I stayed there, breathing. No audience, no grand finale, just me, the truth, and the life I was building. This is for every daughter told to stay silent, to be grateful, to shrink. Silence doesn't protect you, truth does. Healing doesn't always come with an apology. Sometimes it starts when you stop waiting for one. What would you do if your family tried to erase you? Share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more stories that give voice to the unspoken.